These are the tales of renowned musicians whose entire careers ended with a single choice, one night, or one line, music they could never take back, from riots and plane disasters to drunken remarks and intimate moments that went public. Grace Slick, The Meltdown of Lorelei. As well as The Crimson Queen's Head. Grace Slick was the high priestess for those of you who grew up in the 1960s. This woman was the ultimate voice of the psychedelic movement. She was brave, astute, and totally in control when she tore into White Rabbit at Woodstock. And she seemed untouchable for a very long time. However, something very sharper and far more hazardous had taken the place of that previous glow of love and serenity by 1978. She was leading Jefferson Starship on a huge tour of Europe. Additionally, the mood behind the scenes was extremely stressful, gloomy, and alcohol-soaked. The wheels didn't simply come off when they traveled to Germany to perform at a major event, they completely collapsed. Grace was unable to even reach the stage due to her severe disability. The audience was so offended that they set fire to the stage after a physical altercation broke out between her husband and band members. Music, one might assume that a real fire and riot would serve as the ultimate wake-up call. However, the band made the decision to try to salvage the tour just 2 nights later. A small spark started a full-scale explosion when Grace was backstage drinking once again. She had planned to wear a milkmaid attire, and someone remarked that it looked cute. For whatever reason, that was the last straw, and she vanished into the dressing room to make a decision that would permanently alter her life. As you may recall, she was dressed in full costume for the fascist party, which was commanded by the man with the awful mustache, when she came out onto a stage in Germany. I assume you understand what I mean. She then started a routine of making fun of the Second World War in front of a shocked and stunned audience. I've frequently witnessed singing their own music. That was the end of the line, as the venue burst into turmoil for the second time in a week. She was promptly fired. The lady who had previously shaped a generation suddenly became an outsider. With just one bad decision, one awful costume, and one awful joke, Grace Slick's career was instantly over. Donny Osmond, The Covert Relationship. Singing in music, as the Osmonds' breakthrough star and co-host of Donny and Marie, Donny Osmond represented wholesome entertainment in the 1970s. His fan base was so devoted to him that it was almost fanatical. Millions of young girls around the world looked up to him as the perfect guy next door. He was the clean-cut, youthful, and innocent purple-socked heartthrob. His success was based on a very precise, meticulously crafted music promise that he was always young, unreachable, and available. Music plays a minor role in the world of teen idols. Well, the fantasy is everything. I just dreamed about music and singing being taken away. However, as Donny grew older in the late 1970s, the limitations of that idealized boy persona began to feel like a prison. You see, he had developed a strong romantic attachment to Debbie Glenn, a young woman. He also understood that he wanted to live out the rest of his days with her. The enormous, multi-million-dollar apparatus behind him was the issue. His family and management were aware of the harsh reality of the business. An idol who is married is considered retired in the realm of teen marketing. The connection was kept a secret from the public and cameras for months in order to save the brand. Music, young female. But Donny had had enough of leading 2 lives. He made the decision to take a chance. He had no idea that he was going to fall off a professional precipice. When the engagement was formally announced in 1978, it was time. Not for Donny, but for everyone else, it was a day of celebration and toasting. No. Donny ought to have anticipated his admirers' joy. Instead, a star received a much worse reception. Total, music, quiet. And the fantasy fell apart almost instantly. His fan correspondence. That came to a complete stop. Tickets for concerts that used to sell out in a matter of seconds remained unclaimed. Singing, he wasn't only in a new relationship. He had violated the implicit agreement he had made with his audience. Donny Osmond was shunned by the music industry for a very long time as a result of this one personal decision. The happily ever after can be the kiss of death for a teen idol, as evidenced by the fact that he was ultimately compelled to release songs anonymously in order to gain a fair hearing on the radio. Leif Garrett, The Wild Dancing on His Birthday. In 1978, you couldn't go through a magazine without coming across the feathered hair.
He was all around.
The unchallenged monarch of teenage idols. A young person earning a lot of money while still living at home. He was promoted as the ideal golden kid, the upcoming hottie that all parents could trust.
Music, the next Donny Osmond, you know?
But things were already becoming somewhat disorganized, both off the TV screens and the posters. LA was hanging out with older Hollywood groups, having wild parties, and engaging in activities that were inappropriate for teenagers.
I think about you in music.
Just 5 days before turning 18, I believe the beach and that way of life quickly caught up with him on a dark California road. Leaf was riding shotgun in his Porsche with Roland Winkler, his best buddy. He pushed the automobile harder than he should have because, like many young celebrities, he felt unbeatable. It took only one bad turn.
Leaf became unruly.
Music, the night was permanently altered when the car flew off a 60-foot precipice. Although Leaf managed to escape unharmed, he discovered his best friend buried beneath the debris when he turned around.
Although Roland lived, he was paraplegic for the remainder of his life.
Furthermore, neither Leaf's future nor his image would ever be the same. Music, the crash followed Leaf around all the time after that. He could never shake the picture of his friend in the mangled metal. For someone that young, the guilt was too much to bear. He became more involved with the same drugs that had previously been a part of his life. His life is already being torn apart in an attempt, I believe, to silence the responsibility and the memories.
Decades of addiction and severe health issues followed.
A protracted battle that was all connected to that one fatal night, music. The Head Sabotage and the Monkees. Music, by 1968, the Monkees had become a billion-dollar sensation. They were fed up with being treated like a manufactured good, though. They had battled hard to compose their own tunes and perform their own instruments. Nevertheless, the Prefab 4 label continued to follow them around. They felt imprisoned in a bubblegum pop-filled plastic cage. They concluded that systematically destroying the very image that brought them fortune was the only way to get respect from the emerging psychedelic counterculture. To do this, they decided to make a full film titled Head, which is a daring and ultimately fatal approach. They worked with a young Jack Nicholson, and the band's goal was to produce an anti that would brutally dismantle their own image.
Hi, what's the matter? What's the matter with you? I first asked you. Not a thing. I did not order this.
The movie was a non-linear hallucinogenic journey that ridiculed their marketing, TV show, and, regrettably, even their supporters. They were confident that this dark experimental change would gain them the admiration of the hip underground crowd they so sorely yearned for. This movie's late 1968 release was a historical tactical catastrophe. The band's younger fans were so unaware of their appearance in the movie because of the bizarre cryptic marketing. A movie starring a TV band, however, was rejected by the older, serious rock audience. A complete blackout of commerce was the outcome. Not only did the Monkees fail to attract a new audience, the only one they had, they alienated and appalled. Their TV program had vanished by the time the dust settled. Their record-breaking sales had plummeted. And in a single 90-minute act of artistic sabotage, the band had destroyed their kingdom. The brotherly break in Creedence Clearwater Revival. Music, CCR seemed unstoppable for a few scorching years in the late 1960s and early 1970s, like a band designed to consistently produce classic American rock songs. One anthem after another, they were playing anthems, classics like Fortunate Son and Proud Mary, so quickly that it felt routine. John Fogerty, who oversaw the show, authored the songs, and tightly controlled every creative choice, was at the center of it all. Tom, his older brother, had been present from the start. However, that equilibrium subtly changed in a negative way as the band's popularity skyrocketed. Music, come back here with a coin. The other members of the group, including his own brother, soon began to feel more like hired help than partners. Additionally, the tension had been building for a while before 1971. And now Tom was at his breaking point. As the band he helped start began to treat him like a sideman, the pressure on their familial relationship became irrefutable. Tom hit his breaking point during a heated rehearsal.
He made no attempt to bargain or request greater authority. He simply left the band and never came back.
In response, John encouraged the remaining members to compose and perform original songs for the upcoming album, taking the departure very personally. It was almost like a test to see if the band could play without him making all the decisions. Music, well, that album, Mardi Girl, was met with negative reviews and a lackluster reception from fans, and the incredible momentum that CCR had gained was quickly lost.
Well, the split in 1972 didn't end the harm. Decades of litigation followed Tom's departure, and the resentment remained unabated.
John's legal battles with his former bandmates to music stopped them from performing under the Creedence's name persisted even after Tom's death.
A band didn't just end when one brother left. A protracted and agonizing feud ensued, demonstrating that CCR never quite recovered from its cracks.
The American bandstand was Syd Barrett. Music, Pink Floyd was created by the stunning avant-garde genius Syd Barrett.
It was he who created the psychedelic dreamscape on the London Underground.
However, due to heavy LSD use, Syd's mind was fragmented as the band got ready for their first American tour in 1967. In his own band, the man was a ghost, and their future hinged on a successful promotional run in the United States, which started with a prominent performance on American Bandstand. As they were performing See Emily Play, the music director motioned for Syd to be close-upped. As the music began, the audience listened to the lyrics and waited for the charismatic leader to take over. However, the world witnessed Syd Barrett's precise departure from the building as the camera focused in. He was not a singer. He made no attempt to move his mouth. Music, he also failed to give the studio credit. He just stood there, his scary, empty, music gaze demonstrating his detachment from reality. Weeks later, Syd Barrett was let go, and David Gilmour took his position. And Syd remained a loner for the remainder of his life.
Keith Moon, The Tragedy of Churchy.
Music, singing, Keith Moon was the kind of rock star that nothing could ever match for years. He was the human firecracker behind the drum kit, Moon the Lawn, after all. Making every Who performance a spectacle and every moment offstage into a tale that would be told for years to come. By 1970, his crazy reputation appeared to be set in stone. He lived for the laugh, the prank, the turmoil. However, music came to a horrifying end one night outside a pub in the sleepy town of Chazy. A gang of irate skinheads abruptly surrounded Keith's car as he got inside, rocking the Bentley, yelling threats, and trapping him in a rapidly escalating situation. Music, overwhelmed and in a panic, Keith did the only thing his brain could make sense of. He attempted to flee by getting behind the wheel. Regretfully, he was intoxicated and without a license. But when he depressed the accelerator, adrenaline took over. In the chaos, he heard the automobile push forward into the darkness with a thunderous thump, but he continued. Miles later, Keith finally stopped, certain that he had escaped the crowd. His entire world fell apart when the cops showed up and told him what had really transpired. The individual he had hit was not among the group. Neil Boland, a close friend and bodyguard, was the one. Obviously, Keith was never able to shake the hold of that moment. He was silently drained of his soul by the remorse of, I suppose, unintentionally killing someone he loved. As he attempted to hide an unavoidable fact, his drug and alcohol abuse got worse. And the wild, endearing anarchy that fans loved started to turn into something much more devastating and dark. In addition to ending the pleasure, that night in Churchy set off a chain of events that finally cost rock and roll one of its most enduring figures. Music, the event in Columbus, Elvis Costello. Music, by March 1979, Elvis Costello was rock's most irate young man. Armed Forces, Music, a lyrical masterwork, had just broken into the US top 10. He had the potential to become a superstar. However, he was deliberately undermining his own achievements behind the scenes. Driven by a perilous combination of drug misuse and a need to undermine the same respect he had battled for. At a Columbus, Ohio, Holiday Inn bar, that tension, music, finally broke. It was a late-night clash between the new wave and the old guard of rock. Backup singer Bonnie Bramlett was among the members of Stephen Still's touring ensemble that Costello and his band encountered. As the alcohol poured, Costello became more and more irritable, insulting everything that was American. He was searching for the most damaging way to conclude the argument, whether it was about the nation itself or icons like Elvis Presley and Buddy Holly. Music, and Costello withdrew his tongue from his thoughts when Brahamlet questioned him about James Brown and Ray Charles. "Your radio style." The same vile racial epithet was used by him to denigrate both images. A verbal sparring session quickly devolved into a physical altercation due to an offensive insult. The repercussions went beyond the professional realm. It happened quickly and brutally. Known for his toughness, Brahamlet knocked Costello from his bar stool. And as word spread that the golden boy of the critics had suddenly become a national outcast, he was subjected to a barrage of death threats, picketing by the shows, and a record label that almost dropped him. Costello would later reflect that the episode probably saved his life by removing him from a deadly circle of fame before it was too late, even though it knocked his career off course and drove him into years of image rehabilitation. The phrase from John Lennon is larger than Jesus. Music, imagine being so well known that everyone would simply nod if you said anything. In 1966, that was the Beatles. There was nothing they could do wrong in this bubble of music. It was John Lennon who constantly pushed the boundaries. On one particular occasion, he is sitting in his living room drinking tea and chatting casually with a reporter he knows rather well. As they discussed how the world was shifting away from traditional practices, John brought up how his band's influence was growing while faith appeared to be contracting. Well, that was simply interpreted as John being philosophical in London. There was hardly any commotion. At all. However, when that interview eventually reached the American South months later, the response was sufficient to halt the biggest heartthrobs in the world. That quote was all over the place, boy. John claimed that the Beatles were more well-liked than Jesus. And the mop-top era ended almost immediately, to be replaced by a surge of unadulterated animosity. There were radio stations advocating for large bonfires in which children were urged to burn their CDs and posters. The most vile organization ever, the Klan, was even demonstrating against their performances. The band was also no longer concerned about the charts when they arrived for their 1966 U.S. tour. The threat of snipers scared them. Eventually, during a Memphis set, everything fell apart. The stadium's atmosphere was ripped apart by a loud crack in the middle of a song. The band abruptly stopped. They all stared at John, confident that they were witnessing his last moments on this planet. Yes, the shot had been fired at last. Music, well, it appeared to be a firework that had been thrown onto the stage. The fear, however, was real. An era came to an end at that moment of genuine horror. After playing one last gig in San Francisco and wrapping up the tour, they left. A single statement made over tea in a London flat led them to resolve to permanently retire from the stage, or at least together, silencing the largest touring act in music history. The Dallas Highway Escape with Ike and Tina Turner. Music, during the 1960s and 1970s, the Ike and Tina Turner Show was an unstoppable force on the charts, a high-octane soul machine. Although they were a formidable pair to the outside world, their inner circle's reality was a nightmare. Ike Turner has used systematic physical, music, abuse and financial seclusion to keep Tina under complete control for almost 20 years. She sold the recordings with her voice, her legs, and her face. She didn't even own the rights to her own name, so she was effectively a prisoner. The strain had reached a deadly breaking point by the time they arrived in Dallas in July 1976. While traveling to their hotel, an explosion occurred in the rear of a limousine. Music, Tina was left battered and worn out by the violent, gory altercation. However, something inside eventually went cold for the first time in 20 years. "You're speaking to me like that? What do you think? Don't begin with me. I'm not feeling it today." Excellent. Tina was left alone with her reflection in the mirror when they arrived at the motel, and Ike fell into a deep, heavy sleep. Her existence had reduced to a scary binary, she knew at that precise moment. Her chances of surviving the year were slim if she remained in that room till he woke. Tina reached for the door after waiting for his breathing to become extremely steady. Tina Turner sneaked out into the Texas heat, carrying only 36 cents and a gas station credit card, and started running. She did not simply leave.
She was standing in the middle of the night at the edge of a huge multi-lane freeway.
She took a breath, then ran across the lanes, dodging traffic to get to the safety of Aroma on the other side as cars screamed by her in the dark.
The Ian Tina brand died instantly and violently after that midnight sprint across the highway.
That night, in that hotel room in that vehicle, their career together came to an end. However, as she crossed the street, Tina Turner's emergence as a solo legend was revealed to the world.
The Radiant.
Getting out of a shadow that nearly cost her everything at last. Music, it truly strikes you how, quickly things can change when you hear these tales back to back. One night, one sentence, one poor choice, and the entire future is thrown into disarray.
All of your hard work has been lost. They weren't just any people.
These were the bands, sounds, and faces that seemed to be a part of our daily music life. And it affected many of us to witness it all unfold in real time. When everything went wrong, some managed to return, some never did, and some were permanently frozen. So, fans, we truly need to hear from you.
Which of these events stands out in your memory the most? Which music pieces have you been surprised to learn about recently? Did any of these setbacks alter your perception of the song or the performer?
Music, well, feel free to share your opinions in the comment area. Observations regarding the tales I shared, and perhaps one more instance of a brilliant artist who committed a grave error.
If the video was enjoyable to you, please click the like button. We are very grateful.
Additionally, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a memory or a video. Above all, though, my entire team at Do You Remember would like to thank you for watching. In the meantime, keep the record rolling and perhaps remind yourself of how slender the boundary is between stillness and superstardom.